Welcome back to Backwards Compatible, the video game retrospective podcast. I'm your host, Chase.
And I'm Garrett.
We went on a bit of a hiatus there, Garrett. We missed a few weeks. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, everything in our life has been keeping us busy, but
Mostly you.
you know,
I've been
yeah.
sitting here just, gathering dust in the recording booth waiting for you to come back.
I'm sorry, school and work are kicking my butt.
Yes, but we are indeed back. And we are here today to discuss Metal Gear Solid, the first entry, and by first entry I mean third entry, or seventh chronological entry, in the Metal Gear series.
Oh, wow.
But before we get into that, Garrett, we received a listener email.
Oh, who sent it?
This comes from Marcus. And just for all you listeners out there, if you too want to be like Marcus and send us an email, then you can send it to backwardscompatiblepod@gmail.com. Alright, hey Garrett, I stumbled upon this podcast a while back and I'm really enjoying it so far. I look forward to listening to what classic games you have to say next. Keep up the good work. Also, what voice AI program do you use for Chase? It sounds almost natural. I'm not a robot. I am a man. I'm flesh and blood. I'm human.
Shut up. Shut up.
Yes,
no, you're
sir.
not.
I apologize. Sorry.
All I can say is that this voice modification program is, well, in a different place, and I actually planted him with a family and had him raised. So I kind of talk through that voice. That was a little.
I don't sound that monotone, do I?
I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes you do get monotone-ish, but it's not that like big of a deal. I like your voice, Chase. I like your voice more than I like mine.
All right. Well, if you want me to sound robotic, Metal Gear Solid released.
No. Look, just talk normal.
All right. Metal Gear Solid was written and directed by Hideo Kojima, a man after my own heart. Man, Kojima.
That's quite a big name.
Yeah, he is definitely considered one of the great auteurs in gaming, and he is a man with a vision. A very convoluted and obtuse vision, but a vision nonetheless.
This man is dedicated to his job.
Kojima is definitely an interesting character. I don't know if you ever played Death Stranding. Did you ever play that?
I remember hearing about it, but I don't think I have personally, no.
If you thought Metal Gear was a strange series, wait until you play Death Stranding. That one, I feel like that's where Kojima is his most Kojima-ness in Death Stranding. But anyway, Metal Gear Solid was released on September 3rd, 1998 for the PlayStation, developed by Konami.
Big name back then. I mean, it still kind of fell out. When did Konami kind of fell out? I don't know.
Around like mid-2015 or so, when they realized there was more money in pachinko machines than in actual video game development. But I would argue that over the last year or so, they've kind of started coming back around and they realize, hey, we have video game IPs we can exploit.
I don't like the sound of that.
And of course, as most Metal Gear Solid fans know, Kojima's falling out with Konami after Metal Gear Solid 5 was a bit of a black eye for the company, but that's a discussion for a later day.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to seeing that little shit pile.
So, Metal Gear Solid, always been one of my personal favorite games. Not sure if I would put it in my top 10 games of all time, but I really do have a soft spot, not just for this series, but this game in particular, the first one. There's just something about this late 90s metal, industrial, military kind of vibe that I just really enjoy. Half-Life also kind of gives me this same type of feel to it as well. It's not something I can really put into words, but it's just one of those things where when I play a game like the first Half-Life or Metal Gear Solid, I just get it, and I just really enjoy it. It's the sense of isolation, I guess, where it's mostly just you operating on your own devices. Like Doom 2016, oddly enough, even though it's a much more recent game, it kind of gave me that same feeling as well. It's very much a me thing, but what about you, Garrett? This was your first exposure to Metal Gear Solid, so I want to know, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, my thoughts on Metal Gear would have to be, I can see why you feel nostalgia for this in particular game. For example, the character models, they're very iconic in their design, and I want to say the layout of everything too, and as well as the music that comes along with it, and that sort of atmosphere that Kojima and team made.
Yeah, Yoji Shinkawa, he was the character and visual artist for the game, and he did such an impressive job. He wanted to go for like a halfway point between like a manga anime-ish kind of look, but also a Western comic book action hero kind of look. It's a perfect middle ground between the two.
Yeah, I wanna say he did pretty good job, on that balancing act.
I have the game manual right here, and side tangent, but remember when game manuals in the case were like actual books that you could read through and they tell you so much information about the game?
Mhm. Man,
Anyway,
I miss those.
yeah, as a kid, whenever you would get a new game, I would just read through the manual on the car ride back before I got a chance to play it and just dream of what playing it would be like in about 20 minutes. Simpler times. Going through this game manual right here, I'm just flipping through it right now, and it has a lot of the concept art of the characters that Yoji made, and it is just really cool. Very distinct line work and color usage. I just
Look
really
at
like
those
it.
polygons.
Yeah, in the game, they don't have faces.
You're telling me I'm a faceless hero that I can actually put myself into?
Yeah, PS1 era, there's only so much you can do graphics wise, but honestly, you kind of forget or move past the low polyness of it all and get invested and immersed in the story.
And also, I do want to comment about that head bombing. It's actually kind of funny how the animators sort of put it together. So, first off, this is a team of sort of young stars and as well as people with passion who have never really worked on a project like this before.
Right.
They would move and bob their heads whenever they heard any sort of noise coming out of the actor. It was beautiful to see.
Speaking of the voice cast, it really is a bit of a who's who voice cast here. I mean, just going through, we of course have David Hayter, the man, the myth, the legend, as Solid
Mhm.
Snake. Ah, man.
What an iconic voice, that
Yeah,
guy.
David Hayter's Snake is so, I mean, like you said, it is iconic. Of all voiced video game characters, you do a Snake impression and everyone who's played Metal Gear would recognize it, or even
You
people
don't
who
even
haven't
have
played Metal Gear.
Yeah, like, I knew what it was just because, 1, I would see a meme of it, and it would have his voice, and it's just so iconic that you can tell just by one video.
We also have Paul Eiding as Colonel Campbell.
Yeah, his voice acting, always super stellar in my book. He can really play the old grandpas pretty well.
We also have Debbie Mae West as Meryl, and you might recognize her as the English dub voice actor of Tsunade from Naruto.
Oh, yeah. I could instantly remember that voice because, not gonna
Yeah.
lie, kinda had a crush on Tsunade. I was into gills when I was a kid.
Speaking of recognizable voices, we also have Jennifer Hale as Naomi, and I forgot that she was Naomi. She's doing a very pish posh British accent here, but yeah, Jennifer Hale in one of her earliest video game roles, I believe. Christopher Randolph as Hal Otacon Emmerich, Kim May Guest as Mei Ling, Rainey Rodman as Nastasia, Greg Eagles as Gray Fox, and those are just like the main supporting protagonist cast. One thing I kind of forgot about also is everyone, all the voice actors use aliases and pseudonyms for credits for this game, aside from, I think, David Hayter and Doug Stone, the voice of Psycho Mantis. They were the only two that used their actual names for the project, so if you go through the credits of the game, everyone else is under an alias.
I didn't know that. I get like, protecting privacy or whatnot just in case the game flops, but there was not really too much like this game was just sort of a one and only shot that Kojima and team kind of put together. I would get why they would not want to have their names associated with it. It wasn't a surefire.
And while we're here, might as well round out the other main cast. For the main villains, the Foxhound bosses, we got Cam Clark as Liquid Snake, Patrick
Mhm.
Zimmerman as Revolver Ocelot, Peter Lurie as Vulcan Raven, Doug Stone, as I said, of Psycho Mantis, and Tazia Valenza, I think that's how you pronounce it, as Sniper Wolf.
It might be Tasha.
I might have mispronounced that. I apologize.
Okay, out of these people, which one would you say was your favorite?
I mean, I think an easy pick would just be Liquid, if nothing else other than he gets the most opportunity to show off since he is the main villain of the game.
I kind of liked Patrick Zimmerman.
Ocelot, really, I would say Ocelot and Psycho Mantis do a pretty good secondary job as well behind Liquid. I really like the over the topness of Psycho Mantis.
That's for sure. That was quite a scene to really behold.
Yeah. Or maybe I'm just a sucker for characters with like a gas mask filter over their voice.
I think you do. Like a lot
Yeah.
of your favorite characters tend to have that.
Tasha as Sniper Wolf, I think, also does a pretty good job as well. Really, I would argue that the only one who's doing kind of an odd one out performance is Vulcan Raven. So here's the thing. The second time you encounter Vulcan Raven, I think he's doing a much better job, but that first boss fight, Raven is supposed to be like an indigenous American, but Peter Lorre's kind of doing an Arnold Schwarzenegger like impression the first time you fight him. He's like, Alaska is no place for snakes.
Yeah. I remember. Oh, Lord.
Going back to my thoughts on this game, so my first rated M game I ever played when I was a young kid, a bit too young, looking back on it, was Metal Gear Solid 3 on the PS2. My dad had bought it because the guy at the game store told him it's basically like James Bond, and my dad is like, James Bond? I sure like that guy. I'm gonna like this naked snake fella. And my dad is not a gamer, so about 5 minutes in, he realized he doesn't know how to operate a dual stick control, and he's like, this game is too confusing, I'll tell you what. Here you go, son. You give it a try. I didn't make it very far into the game. I think it was a bit beyond me at the time, but I just remember being very captivated and fascinated by everything going on. I was also very confused and didn't understand half of what the characters were saying because I was like 8 or 9 years old and this game was very much geared towards adults, so got stuck at a certain point and then just kind of forgot about it. But years later, when I got much older, I think in my late teens or so, I played through the first game, Metal Gear Solid, on a friend's PS1. And yeah, it's of its time in a few departments, as we'll get to in a second. But overall, I really, really liked the game. The voice acting I thought was really intriguing and well performed for the most part. The gameplay was a little on the simple side compared to games at the time, but it was still pretty ahead of its time. And the story and like the wackiness, but also the serious drama and stakes, it was just a really good, solid, forgive the pun. Yeah, it was just a solid game, and I fell in love with the series right there. I immediately got the Legacy Collection on PS3. I was able to track down on eBay for a pretty good amount at the time, and I've been a fan ever since. This game, when it came out, it was widely praised and received a lot of critic acclaim for its film-like cinematic presentation. Kojima was very much a movie guy, and he wanted to make this game feel like an interactive
He
movie.
watched a lot of action movies,
Yeah,
to, like, prepare for this, I believe, or he was inspired by it, I can't
yeah.
remember.
I know the John Carpenter movie Escape from New York was a pretty big influence on this game, and it really shows. Solid Snake, as a character, is heavily based off of Kurt Russell's character, Snake Plissken, in the movie. Even the movie itself, there's a few similar plot points from Escape from New York in Metal Gear Solid. It wears its influence on its sleeve, I will say.
Talking about the story, how about we go there?
Well, we might as well start at the beginning. This is the third entry in the Metal Gear series as a whole because there were two games prior to this one. There was Metal
Mhm.
Gear and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake for the MSX2 computer back in the 80s. They were all supported to the NES at the time, but from what I've heard, I haven't played them personally, but from what people have told me, the NES ports were very much an inferior version.
I mean, like, Kojima worked a little bit on it on those projects, but he knew what he wanted and he saw to it. That's all I gotta
Yeah.
say about it.
Metal Gear Solid was intended to be something of a soft reboot for the series where, yeah, the first two games are still part of the timeline, and this game does heavily reference the past events, such as Big Boss and Gray Fox characters. That comes into play a lot in this game. But for the most part, you can, and most people do, start here. This is where Metal Gear became Metal Gear. Going on a bit of a detour here, but let's talk about the music for this game.
R16 detour.
It's a podcast. A podcast is just a detour after detour.
All right, let's go to
Yeah.
music.
The music was mostly composed by Konami's in-house musicians, and they did a really bang-up job. They really captured that cinematic, a bit of an overused word, but cinematic feel that the
Mhm.
score wanted to. Very orchestral, very grandiose, very intense, had a very synthetic but very adrenaline, energetic feel to a lot of music, very eerie. The main composers, I believe, were, I'm gonna butcher these names, Kazuki Miyaoka and Hiroyuki Togo. Again, apologies if I mispronounced those horribly. I'm sure I did. What were some of your favorite music tracks to the game? Because I got a few right here.
I would have to say it's, of course, the main theme because the main
Mhm.
theme is very iconic, and I just can't ever go without kind of like having that in my head. I probably would play it like 2 seconds in my head every day.
Yeah. So much of the music, we've said iconic a lot already, but it is iconic. The
It's
music
iconic.
it is. It is though. The main theme, the escape theme, the da 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 like
Watch out, we'll get copyrighted, my guy.
exclamation point above Konami's heads. Dude, the fucking box thing where you hide in a box and okay, you just shot a guard in the face, hide in a box. Huh, just a box.
Mm, yes, the blood on the box doesn't tell me anything.
This box wasn't here 2 seconds ago when I turned around.
Never underestimate the power of a box.
Some guy just punched me in the face, ran around the corner, and I've just found a box. Must have been my imagination.
Yeah, this black eye doesn't feel real.
Yeah. I mean, what could we say about the box thing that hasn't been said already? It's been memed to death, along with the
Mhm,
exclamation point. I mean, it was in Wreck-It Ralph, for God's sake, my man.
mhm.
Back to music, though. One theme that I really enjoy is Psycho Mantis's main theme. It starts playing when you meet up with Meryl right before you encounter Mantis. It's so haunting and eerie. It really sets up the tension and atmosphere going into this boss fight that something's wrong about this whole situation. I think Otacon does comment on it as well when you get into a codec call with Meryl. He's like, what was that music playing on in the background?
With Meryl?
With Otacon when you talk to
With
Meryl. That's another thing
I
too.
don't know.
The fourth wall is not very strong in Metal Gear at all. Characters will regularly tell you everything about the game from like, press this button in order to perform this action, Snake. In order to find out Meryl's codec signal, Colonel Campbell tells you to find the code on the back of the box because that's where it's printed at. You can't find it otherwise, although I think if you hassle Campbell enough, he'll eventually tell you. But yeah, rip to all the people who didn't have access to the box cover back in the day and thus they couldn't call Meryl.
Mhm.
Ah, man, the codec. Such a great concept for dialogue between long distance characters, since Snake is by himself for the most part. Like, yeah, he meets up with Otacon and Meryl, but Campbell, Mei Ling, and all of them, and just character, even Otacon and Meryl when he's not with them, the codec is such a great way to provide dialogue scenes between them. Just call them up. It's basically a cell phone.
I just wanna let it ring. I wanna keep it ringing because, to be honest, I would put that as my ringtone.
It is my ringtone.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Although it is funny, like, I know it's not the most original idea for a ringtone, but I was still surprised when we went out to a restaurant once a while back, and I heard the codec ringtone going off, and it wasn't me, it was some other guy in the restaurant. And I'm just like, I know it's not a very obscure, super deep cut thing or anything, but what are the odds that me and another guy in the same restaurant have the exact same custom ringtone?
Like, it's not impossible, but I would say fairly possible.
There are so many recorded dialogue for the characters in the codec. Depending on the circumstances, characters will react to what you're doing. Like, for example, if you hide in the box and call Nastasia, she's the weapons expert, and every time you equip a different weapon and call her, she'll give you information on how to use that weapon. And like, if you hide in a box and then call her, she'll just give you a very bored and disinterested description of what a cardboard box is. A cardboard box is often recycled from other cardboard boxes. You can use it to store cans or something or whatever. I don't know.
That's beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that.
Mei Ling will give you a different proverb from a various writer or philosopher every time you save the game. That's another bit of fourth wall breaking. Saving the game is an in-universe explanation of just talking to Mei Ling. And I think if you keep refusing to save your game, but you keep calling her, she'll eventually get pissed off and be like, you know what? Fuck you. I'm not saving your progress anymore. How do you like me now?
I like it that each one of them has their own style, I can say that. Like, it
Yeah.
really keeps it fresh, and it doesn't make it seem like it's such an annoying tool. If it wasn't perfected right, it could have been something that was super annoying, but instead it became something very iconic, and I'm glad that it did. I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of love was put into that system.
Some of the conversations do go on a little bit longer than I personally would like, especially on a replay, but it's all the voice acting is stellar, as mentioned, and it gives you a lot of insight into the characters and plot, so I don't mind it as much. Two characters you can contact via the codec, or rather, they mostly contact you, are Master Miller and Deep Throat. These two are interesting just because of, well, spoiler alert, Master Miller turns out to be Liquid in disguise.
Oh no.
I know. It's almost as if their voices sound very similar to each other. But it is interesting where after it's revealed that Miller is Liquid, it does put a lot of conversations you have with Miller in different context. It's also kind of creepy a little bit where after you fight Liquid in the Hindy helicopter and you shoot him down, you can't contact Miller for a while after that. You can find Liquid's parachute later. I think it's around the area where you fight Sniper Wolf for the second time. And Campbell and Snake have a conversation of, Liquid probably left that parachute there on purpose just to tell you, hey, I'm still alive and I'm going out to kill you. And then there's Deep Throat. Good old Deep Throat, named after the Watergate whistleblower,
Okay, so
which Snake
that
points out.
name, I'm sorry, but who came up with that?
Well, as Snake himself points out, it's a reference to the whistleblower of the whole Watergate Nixon scandal. That's who Deep Throat was. But to be fair, they did get it from a porno called Deep Throat back in like the 60s or something. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's why.
Yeah, it's I think I laughed for at least 5 minutes when I first heard that, and they took it so freaking serious.
I
Like,
mean, are
okay,
you saying that there's some sort of phallic message between a conversation of Deep Throat and Solid Snake? What are you implying here?
I'm not implying anything. I'm just stating a fact.
I don't know if there were a few optional conversations that I might have missed, but so Deep Throat turns out to be Gray Fox, who's been contacting you the whole time, giving you like cryptic warnings about dangerous encounters, but he doesn't really interact with you all that much. There were only like a couple calls I had with him on my recent playthrough, so I don't know if I may have accidentally missed a few messages from him or not, but I could have sworn Deep Throat played a bit more of a heavier role in the game than he actually did.
So, Gray Fox, I wanna say, is, like, kind of one of my favorite characters out of it.
Yeah, you're that ninja.
Although the boss fight, though, like, to be honest, it kinda,
Ugh,
like,
I hated that boss fight. I don't know. I swear, the first time I played this game, I didn't find the Gray Fox fight all that hard, but this playthrough, I'm like, I was stuck on him for a while. Like, I knew what to do, but he could just effectively two-shot me. You have to either stun him with, like, chafe grenades that'll shut his armor suit down, and then fight him with guns, or use melee combat, or close quarter combat. CQC. So if you keep fighting him with CQC, he'll eventually put his sword away and be like, ah, yes, we must engage in melee combat. It is the basis of all combat. Only a fool trusts his life to a weapon. Or you could just do what I do, where you fight him for a few seconds with CQC, get him to put his sword away, and then you just spam chafe grenades and then shoot him with a gun. What tripped me up, though, is even after you defeat him, like you get his health bar to 0, the fight still continues where he can still deal damage to you. So if you're low enough on health, and it is a fairly tough fight for at that point in the game, you can still lose the fight and start all over, even after you quote-unquote defeated him. So yeah, I didn't care for that part.
can't say there ain't a few weird bugs.
Yeah, but Gray Fox as a character is really cool. I mean, he's a cyborg ninja samurai mercenary. How is that not awesome?
Mhm, exactly. Not to mention, he can go invisible.
Gray Fox is just a really cool character, also from a narrative standpoint, since he's from Metal Gear 2, I think it is, where he fought Snake in Zanzibar, and now he's been redesigned. He's been built back stronger, better, faster. So this is kind of a weird, not Mandela effect, but just kind of my memory exaggerating a little bit. The hallway you walk down right before you meet Gray Fox and by extension Otacon, where you just see all the corpses of the soldiers Gray Fox has just cut down and brutalized in his rampage to Otacon. I remember that hallway being way bloodier and gorier than it actually is. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of blood and stuff for a PS1 game. I know it's M-rated, but still. The first time I walked through that hallway, I'm just like, geez, this took a violent turn.
It was kind of something out of a horror movie, that's for sure.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, it was pretty cool and really built up Gray Fox as the ultimate badass cyborg, but At the end, he tragically dies trying to save Snake.
What a hero, trying to redeem himself in his final moments.
Well, his whole thing is he wants to die by Snake's hand because Snake is, in his eyes, the ultimate prey. He considers Snake the only true worthy opponent. So when Liquid's about to kill Snake with Metal Gear, spoilers for the end of the game, by the way, he comes in and ultimately is the reason you gain the upper hand against Metal Gear, but it costs him his life in the end.
Sad fox noises.
He was the only Foxhound member to gain the codename Fox. And he's also Naomi's brother, well, adopted brother, which is another thing I kind of forgot about. You want to talk about Naomi, since we're going on this tangent of a tangent?
Isn't Naomi like the scientist that like talks on the
Yeah,
summary?
she's part of Campbell's codec call. They're both in like the mission control area. She is the scientist that, in the beginning of the game, if you watch like the mission briefing cutscene, she administers a shot to Snake right before he deploys on the mission. At the time, she just brushes it off of like Arctic cold immunity shot or whatever, so you don't feel the cold. But as we later find out, she was injecting him with fox dye.
What did Fox Die do again?
Fox dye was like this artificial virus that Naomi developed that targets and kills specific people based on their genes and DNA. She put it into Snake and everyone else as a way of exacting revenge for her brother Gray Fox, who she presumed was dead, and she blamed Snake for that. She does come around at the end and realize Snake isn't the kind of bad villain that she thought he was, and she is a fleshed out character. One of my personal gripes with Metal Gear as a series is I don't necessarily like the way the women are portrayed throughout the series. I feel like they lean a bit too much on fan servicey. Don't get me wrong, they're not one note. They are very established characters with motivations and goals, but do we really need a close-up on
I mistake that ass.
Do we really need a close-up on Meryl's ass twice in this game? Do we?
I know. Like, and also not to mention, everyone's like, it's the way that she walks. I could tell it wasn't a terrorist.
Also, everyone, to be fair, this one is much more understandable, but the women in this game are super horny for Snake, but I mean, hey, who can blame him, am I right?
Yep, pretty much. Snake's a catch.
Like Sniper Wolf, she wants to ride that solid Snake, if you know what I mean. Heh heh heh.
You mean kill him, right?
Right.
I can't remember who said it. I think it was Ocelot, but like Sniper Wolf was like a big predator and just wanted to kill Snake.
The sexualization of the female characters isn't too bad in this game, at least not in comparison to the later games. There's a certain character in Metal Gear Solid 5 that is a very egregious example of fan service, but that's neither here nor there. As it is, though, it's just a minor nitpick of mine. I do wish the female characters didn't have to be sexy all the time. They could just be their own characters. But he does give the women characters actual motivations. Like, Naomi wants revenge for her brother. She plays a huge role in the second half of the game when her betrayal to Snake and Colonel Campbell is revealed. There's also Meryl. She wants to be a soldier, and she goes through an actual character development arc of starting off as a bit of a hotshot rookie who thinks she's way more skilled and experienced than she actually is, and then she realizes how naive she was at the end.
War is a bad thing.
Who knew that getting shot was painful? People die when they are killed, as Meryl discovers. In the beginning, she's like, I'm a tough soldier. I can handle anything. And then she just gets gunned down by Sniper Wolf halfway through the game. And she's like, I was wrong. This war fucking sucks. Which, I mean, she's not wrong, but I'm like, it took you until now to realize that, hey, people dying isn't a good thing.
Yeah, like that was like such a slap in the face. And not gonna lie, I think my neighbors woke up to me laughing at that.
Yeah, it is a bit of a overly drawn out scene of her like getting shot by Sniper Wolf and just like completely rejecting what had been her thesis on life up to that point to Snake, but the voice actress does a really good job in delivering the emotional scene of it. Speaking of Meryl, this game does have two different endings. So during the torture scene towards the end of the game, where Snake gets captured by Sniper Wolf and then Ocelot and Liquid put him in that torture device, if you fail to survive the torture or you give up and submit, Meryl dies. Like, they kill Meryl later in the game.
Then who replaces Meryl?
Otacon.
Hey!
Yeah. So like I said, there's two endings. Meryl survives and she joins Snake at the end in the big escape from the base. Or if Meryl dies, then Otacon joins up with Snake and they escape the base together. And they even have a cute little 2001 A Space Odyssey reference because of their names. So the thing about this ending is, first off, it gives you a new game plus, two different items based on who accompanies you. If Meryl joins you, then you get a head bandana that gives you infinite ammo on your next playthrough, which is pretty useful.
Guns blazing. Pew pew.
But if Otacon is the one that joins you, you get a stealth suit that makes you invisible on your new game plus. So again, equally useful items, depending on how you want to approach the game. But here's the thing though with this two different ending thing. As anyone who's played the later games knows, it's completely retconned because both Meryl and Otacon survive regardless of Meryl survives or not in this game. She still shows up in later games.
Mm-hmm.
In Metal Gear Solid 2, Meryl doesn't reappear, but Otacon plays a huge role. So for a while, people just thought, is the Otacon ending the canon answer since Meryl doesn't show up in 2?
Yeah, that was probably like kind of weird. I can
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
But then she shows up again later, so it's like, oh, never mind. I guess the two different endings has no bearing whatsoever on the story. I give Kojima props for putting the idea in for two different endings. It does make the game replayability a bit more interesting, but from a narrative standpoint and looking back on it from the later games, it is completely retconned and doesn't mean anything.
Which it usually happens when they don't think it's going to like I guess keep going. I mean, even though they want
Yeah.
to, it's just sort of
Yeah,
like
like I said, it made sense for the time, this being
yeah.
yeah, it made sense at the time, but looking back on it, it doesn't matter if
In
Meryl lives or
the
dies.
end.
What are your thoughts on Meryl?
At first, I thought she was just kind of annoying. They did a good job of that if that was their intention. Can we talk about the animation in the codec when she like takes off her mask, whipping of the hair and everything? Like they really
Yeah,
went in on that.
she is very much set up to be the love interest of the game, and in the Meryl ending, her and Snake do hook up at the end, so unnecessary romance there for my taste, but it was
Yeah.
the 90s, what can you do?
It kind of did feel sort of forced upon. I mean, I wouldn't want to try to get with my boss's niece,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, she's Colonel Campbell's niece, and yeah, that's kind of awkward there. I wouldn't say it's artificial and super forced. I do think there is chemistry between Snake and Meryl, but I
Also,
just don't think it was necessary.
wasn't Snake like retired before
Well,
the
he's only
story came
30.
through?
He's 30 in this game.
Oh, okay.
Even
Makes
then,
sense.
I don't. How old is Meryl in this game? I assume she's in her mid 20s, but she could be
Yeah,
a bit younger.
I thought she would be like 26 maybe, maybe 24 if she is younger.
It's not a huge age gap, but given just
Yeah.
like the experience and demeanor of Snake, he does come across as much older, but I'm pretty sure he's only like 30 in this game, so it's not a huge age gap, but still. That is a good point,
Oh,
though. We haven't talked about Solid Snake himself. We've talked about David Hayter, who does an excellent performance, but let's talk about the legendary mercenary Snake.
dude, Snake was pretty awesome, not gonna lie. But I will say sometimes his flirting was kind of overstepping the boundaries, but I just
I
think
interpreted it less as flirting and just more as being like kind of coy with
was he
everything.
playing coy? Yeah, I think he was
Like
mostly
he
playing
was just
coy.
kind
He did
of
flirt a little bit though, like with
I
some of
guess
them.
again, I don't think he was deliberately trying to hit on them or anything. He was just kind of going along with the whole femme fatale thing with Sniper Wolf and all that.
Well, also, like he literally said Mei Ling was like cute, you know.
Yeah, but
Cute.
Naomi also says she wouldn't mind being strip searched by Snake anytime. So
Yeah, I know.
everyone's
Like,
horny for
gee,
Snake.
yeah, dude. I would be too for Snake.
Snake is a weird mix of Jean-Claude Van Damme and Christopher Walken, and like I said, he's got a little bit of Kurt Russell thrown in. So
This dude was definitely he's 30 years old. He's just coming out of retirement.
they took his dogs.
They took his dog. And he's got nice headband and he's a supernatural super spy. Yeah, he is he's definitely like one of my favorite protagonists in terms of action because it feels like yeah, he is the stereotypical hero, but he sort of is a parody on it to me.
Parody, I wouldn't say is the right word. I'd say he's a deconstruction of like
Okay.
the action hero archetype, where on the surface you would think, yeah, he's this badass ex-marine, super spy, super soldier. He's great at combat and infiltration and espionage. But as you
Realize he has feelings.
yeah, he's hiding. It's not exactly by modern standards the most original take on the archetype, but for the time, the idea of having this super badass guy actually be sentimental, have emotional baggage, and a major recurring theme throughout this game, I feel, is the question of motivation. What drives people to pursue these type of goals? And I think several characters have different outlooks on that. Liquid Snake and Naomi, to an extent, they believe it's all genetic. Our fate is given to us by birth. Psycho Mantis, for example, I think his standpoint is people are just born like this. People are made to be this way based on their upbringing and their personal history. As for Snake, Meryl herself, after the Psycho Mantis fight, she outright asks him, "What are you fighting for?" And I think Otacon reiterates that a bit later, or at least carries a similar sentiment of what is Snake's motivation? Why is he doing this? And it's a good question. Snake doesn't really have a real answer to both times he's confronted by Otacon and Meryl. He just says this is what he knows. He's meant for the battlefield, that he is a soldier first and foremost. He carries out his duties and his orders, and he gets the job done. He doesn't really consider himself a hero. He does say to Meryl, there's no real heroes that stay alive in war. All the heroes either die or go to prison. And I think that sums up Snake's outlooks at that time pretty well. He doesn't look at himself as a good person.
Yeah, and that's the big thing about Snake. Even though he's this super badass, strong individual, he still lacks a life where it's just peaceful.
As I said earlier, the idea of deconstructing and really analyzing the action hero archetype as not being what they're cracked up to be, it's been done a lot more since the 90s. It is a much more common thing to do, but for the time, Snake was an interesting question to the player. It made people rethink all the movie characters, really take a hard look at them and say, is this the kind of person you consider inspirational? All right, we're gonna kind of backtrack here and talk about the development of this game. I feel like we kind of jumped in head first here, but development behind Metal Gear Solid is really fascinating. They went to Kojima and the developers went to a lot of actual military bases as a way to get hands-on experience and inspiration and make sure that all their references were accurate to real-world military technology and training.
And you gotta love that commitment and passion.
I think Kojima got a chance to ride in a tank at one point when he visited a US base.
How many people can say that they rode in a tank? I can't. But also, what was very interesting about the development too is that they sort of created the layout of everything with Legos.
Yeah, so because this was so early in like 3D game design, a lot of game developers weren't quite used to level design in a 3D space.
Yeah.
The board members of Konami get a call and they're like, Hideo wants more Legos and make sure that they're not Mega Blocks. They are not the same thing, he says. Give me Legos, damn it.
5% was advertisement, 10% was wages, and the rest of it was just spent on Legos.
Another fun fact I found about is because there's no real world reference equivalent to Metal Gear Rex, obviously, so they got an animator from Mobile Suit Gundam to act as
Yeah.
like an overseer for the animation on Metal Gear. He was like, no, this is how giant robots would move and operate. Trust me, I'm a professional.
I love it that they outsourced to somebody who animated that, and I can see the resemblance.
Jumping ahead a little bit again, but man, Metal Gear Rex, it's the titular Metal Gear. The Metal Gear series of weapons and vehicles are probably my favorite take on the mecha genre in anime and video games because they just have such a sleek, animalistic vibe to them. They are weapons of mass destruction, but they're basically dinosaurs because Metal Gear Rex roars. That's a thing throughout the entire series is I don't know why the pilot would make them move like a T-Rex and roar, but here we are.
You know what I think? Given all the names for everybody, as well as the characteristics of that Metal Gear, Metal Gear Solid is also about humanity versus animosity, kind of like conflict within oneself. You can either feed the bad dog or feed the good dog, if you guys have heard that reference before, which eventually determine who you become as a person. I gotta say, Kojima put a lot of messages in, and I just realized that as I'm talking with you.
The whole thing with Metal Gear is that it can launch a nuke from anywhere in the world without warning, and that's like the main danger of it. And it's a very dangerous advanced weapon that will usher in like a new arms race, but it's also a
Mhm.
dinosaur.
Rawr.
The Metal Gear boss fight is so awesome and challenging if you don't know how to dodge the missiles because those things pack a punch. Also, this isn't the last time it's going to happen, but I've noticed a pattern in Metal Gear where every final boss in a Metal Gear Solid game starts off with you fighting a giant robot that eventually just devolves in the pilot taking their shirt off and fighting you in hand-to-hand combat. This isn't the last time it's going to happen.
Back to our point of
What was our point again? We've been
yeah, I
on.
don't
This
even
has
know.
just been the tangent of all tangents here on this episode. Like we are kind of just going off the cuff on this one. For
Mhm.
example, I completely forgot about this, but the opening logo for Konami, that do do do, that little music tune is taken directly from the main theme of Kojima's previous game, Police Knots.
Really?
Yeah, Police Knots is kind of referenced a lot throughout this game. Like I think Otacon has a poster of Police Knots in his office, and when he talks about why he got into engineering and weapon design,
It's because he wanted to create a real anime waifu.
I wanted to build a Gundam. The anime clip that plays during his little monologue is, I believe, from Police Knots. But yeah, I like that little intro music because it just adds to the intriguing but also kind of haunting vibe of the game's
Mhm.
music, and it sets it up pretty well. This game is chock full of really weird and strange quotes. If you call Miller at one point, he basically gives you a reassurance monologue of, like, believe in yourself and all that. And I believe his quote at the end is Snake, trust your instincts as a soldier, as a gamer.
The mind's eye has been opened. We are all gamers
The
in
most
this
oppressed minority in America. Gamers will rise up.
and fight the evils of the world.
Uh, Meryl says when she holds up her Desert Eagle to show off to Snake, she's like, I'm not like other girls. I'm more comfortable with this Desert Eagle than I am with a bra.
Yeah, like that was like really like super
Yeah,
cringe, not gonna
I'm
lie.
just like, can you tell this was written by a man?
Yeah, exactly.
There's another line she says later when I think it's when Snake asks her where she hid her security card from the search that the guards did when they took her prisoner. Oh, women have more hiding places than men.
Oh jeez.
Yeah, just ask Paz how that worked out for her. But anyway, speaking of hiding places, Snake hides his cigarettes in his stomach. I don't think that's good at all for multiple reasons, but I do like the little anti-smoking messaging this game has, because if you equip the cigarettes for too long, it drains your health after a while.
Kind of saying, hey, cigarettes are bad for you.
Don't be like Snake. Smoking will kill you. Although it is useful for dodging all the laser beams and everything, because you can use the smoke of cigarettes to find out where the beams are.
Which is great for that interactive gameplay and
Yeah.
outside the box thinking. It really rewards the player.
Wow. Well, let's talk about the gameplay in this video game.
Okay, well, first, I actually like the different camera angle. Really,
Yeah.
Kojima decided this camera angle because he felt he would get nauseous.
He
First person or even behind the character, I believe.
Yeah, Konami wanted this game to be entirely first person, but Kojima was like, "Nah, that's not how we do things here." So, in the end, the game you have the option to go into first person, but you can't can
Like,
only
you can look around, you can't
yeah,
move.
you can't fight back or move around. You can just look. But it allows you to look around corners and stuff, see where items and enemies are. So, it has its uses.
Yeah, and also I always find this so funny how like okay, so there's some points in the game where you'll have this long hallway and The people will be looking down the hallway. They can clearly see you, but because they're not in the game screen, like the normal game screen, they don't actually see you because you're just outside of their field of vision.
As long as you stay out of their field of vision, because they can still see you even if they're off screen. And this is kind of one of my things with the game where I think it suffers from the whole this was their first entry syndrome where
Mhm.
so it can be forgiven, like I said, it is the first game, but I feel like the field of view you have in the normal camera, like the top down third person view, it doesn't give you a very large line of sight. Like it's not like super cramped or anything. You still get a decent field of vision, but there were multiple times where I don't know if this says more about how much I suck, but I just felt like I was running into problems of enemies and obstacles that were off screen, like just outside of my field of vision that I couldn't really see or notice coming. So I don't know. I feel like it's just a somewhat limited perspective in that regard.
Mhm.
There's one point where after you rappel down the tower after the Hind D fight with Liquid, there's a bridge that you have to cross, but if you don't go into first person before crossing, you'll just get gunned down by a bunch of guards that are on the other side that you otherwise wouldn't notice or see until it's too late. You have to snipe or blow them up from a distance beforehand, but I'm like, this just seems a bit unfair. This feels like punishing me for having a limited line of sight, but maybe that's just me.
No, I mean, it's a valid point, and I'm sure they more than likely fixed it, right?
Yeah, from Metal Gear 2 onwards, you have way more options of in terms of observation and infiltration and all that. The stealth mechanics, I think, are a decent start, but maybe this is just, modern gameplay looking back on it. But it is a fairly straightforward system. Like we joked about earlier, the guards are very forgetful in this game. You can just shoot them right in the back of the head, go behind a box or something, and they'll just must have been my imagination. Their patrol patterns are fairly rigid and predictable, but that's not necessarily a
A
bad thing.
surveillance camera.
I will give the developers credit. There are quite a few creative ways you can interact and distract the guards, and the way they notice you too. They will react to your footsteps if you walk too
Mhm.
close to them. If you walk through a puddle or something, they'll hear the splashing. And if you're outside and you walk through the snow, they will find your footprints and be like, hey, whose footprints are these?
Yeah, I believe they start following it, don't they?
They do. You can also, if you're sneaking around and you cling to a wall, you can knock on the wall and they'll be drawn to the noise so you can sneak around them or lure them into an ambush. There are various ways that you can go about the stealth aspects of this game, which I appreciate. I'm just saying that, from a legacy age standpoint, I know it's not entirely fair, but the stealth mechanics are a bit simple compared to modern stealth games, but you can't really hold it against the game.
Yeah, I mean, like it was its first game to really make the stealth genre really pop out. And this game probably one of my favorite stealth games. I don't really play stealth games too much, and usually I like playing even though I do like playing a stealthy style, just because I like being a sneaky little guy. This game was like a highly interactive environment that had all these stealth mechanics, even though the AI wasn't like the super greatest, but it was still great for that time.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
I'm just
yeah. I'm not denying that for the time, this was very groundbreaking. This was like nothing had ever been done on this scale or level before, not just story wise, but gameplay wise as well. This was a
Mhm.
huge leap forward for gaming, don't get me wrong. It's just one of those things where it's a little bit hard to come back to these days, but not the
Oh, yeah.
worst.
Yeah, that's for sure. I gotta say, like, it did feel kinda different. Probably wouldn't have found out about all those things that you could do in Metal Gear through my first playthrough, to be honest. I probably tried sneaking around them the hard way.
And of course,
But
what would an action game be without various weapons you can pick up and equip?
weapons, let's talk about 'em.
There's, of course, the ever classic SOCOM pistol, which you can find a silencer for later in the game so you can take enemies out sneaky.
Next is like a
Yeah,
FAMAS,
yeah, Phasmas, I think it is, the assault rifle, the machine gun of the game.
Mhm.
Yeah, that thing is useful when it comes to combat.
The PSG-1 sniper rifle, which is a
Oh,
big one.
Okay, so the first time I played this game, I was so lost. When you first encounter Sniper Wolf, she shoots Meryl, pins her down, and you can't proceed without getting the sniper rifle. So you have to backtrack of not too far back, looking back on it in hindsight, but I just remember being so frustrated and lost because I had no idea where to find the sniper rifle. It turns out it's hidden in like the second floor basement that you were at earlier in order to, right before the Ocelot boss fight. I don't know. Again, I'm just probably a big dum dum and I have like caveman brain, but I don't know. This game is a little cryptic and it doesn't have to choreograph everything. And far be it from me to complain about games being way too handholdy. I know I've voiced criticisms of modern games being a little too lenient these days. I just feel like there's a lot of points and the game's a little too cryptic and obtuse for its own good. Not the most confusing or obscure it could be, but
Mhm.
the sniper rifle is pretty useful, especially if you pick up the thermal goggles with it, so you can just snipe enemies from a distance without having to constantly look where they're at or double check the environment. You can just tell instantly where the enemies are positioned.
I will say, like, using this sniper rifle with the sniper wolf. Okay, I personally don't like the sniper wolf one, even though it's different. I don't really like the boss fight too much. It's just kind of like find sniper wolf in this scene, shoot her
Yeah.
before she shoots you.
It's a point and click adventure.
Yeah.
There's also the two rocket launchers you get. There's the Stinger and the what is it? The
Kita.
Yeah, the Nikita. So the Nikita is really fun because after you fire the missile, you can control where the missile goes. Like it's a controllable missile. And there's one part early on in the game where this gas chamber that's filling up. So you have to shoot the rocket at the control panel in order to stop the gas. And it's just a fun like little maze section where you're steering the rocket, zigzagging through the offices and the hallways, dodging the bullets and everything. And I'm just like, imagine being a guard or something. You just go into a hallway on patrol and you just see this rocket missile just zigzagging like a remote controlled car all over the place. I'm just
Dude,
like,
I would just go back to the break room.
feel like that one guard that has IBS. He can't stay out of the bathroom.
Yeah, that dude needs to get something checked out.
I think that's the same guard Meryl like beat up and stole her uniform from because he's like, that bitch stole my uniform.
Yeah.
And then you, of course, have the Stinger missile, which is a bit different in that it locks on to its target. You have to lock onto the target before you fire it, otherwise, it would just fly off into the distance. You get it when you fight Liquid for the first time in his Hind D helicopter. And side note, I have this written in my notes. At the beginning of the game, Liquid hops in the Hind D helicopter to go, as he says, swat down some bothersome flies, the F1 fighter jets, I believe. And I wrote down, I don't think a Hind D could destroy two F1 fighter jets. I don't think that's how that fight would go in Liquid's favor.
Mhm.
But I do like the boss fight against Liquid in the Hind D on top of the tower. It's just really cool. You have to use your speakers in order to triangulate where the helicopter is coming from because it dives in and out of your vision. Apparently, if you don't have a stereo speaker set up, you just have a mono speaker and you call Campbell asking for assistance, he'll be like, what do you mean you don't have a stereo speaker, you peasant? It smells like broken here. Speaking of the Hind D boss fight, after you shoot it down and blow it up, Snake himself also, he does reiterate the bothersome fly quote on Liquid himself. It's the most like action hero-y Snake is in the game because after you blow up the helicopter, he just looks down at the explosion, puffs a cigarette, and is like, guess that takes care of the cremation.
Talk about free funeral services.
It's a fun little action hero moment, but it did feel a bit out of character for Snake. There's also the C4 and Claymore mines, which are useful. You use the C4 to blow up a bunch of walls in order to get to where the Arms Tech president is being held. But other than that, I feel like C4 doesn't have too much use. Like, you can use it to plant ambushes and whatnot, but after the Ocelot fight, I didn't really use the C4 all that much. I found the Claymore mines to be way more practical.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like considering with the Claymore, you just need to have an enemy get close to him compared to C4, you trying to time it. Feels like it provides a little bit more flexibility. Just don't run into the lasers.
You can blow yourself up if you walk into your own claymore trap, so that's a thing. And there's the various grenades. There's the regular grenades. There's the chafe and stun grenades, which are useful against various different enemies. Chafe grenades are useful against Gray Fox, anything with equipment or technology. You can also use them to shut down security cameras. There's one part right before you enter the where Metal Gear Rex is being contained. You have to go across a catwalk that's just completely covered by security camera sentry guns. So if you don't have any chafe grenades on you, you are going to get eviscerated by those camera guns.
That doesn't sound like a fun sight to see. Not my Solid Snake.
Snake? Snake? Snake! I couldn't even be mad with the game over screen in this game because it's that da 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 da, and
Mhm.
whoever NPC you're interacting with at the time will comment on it. Like Mei Ling will be like, "No, Snake, get up, Snake!"
It's good. I love the voices. It
Yeah.
kinda makes you kinda not want to die in terms of, like, not make them feel like you just broke their heart.
Even when Snake is dying, his dying scream still sounds so cool. It's great. I couldn't even be mad whenever I died. Yeah. We've touched on it a little bit, but you want to go through the various boss fights of the game?
Okay, sounds good.
Well, the first boss fight you encounter is Revolver Ocelot.
And Revolver Ocelot has the President, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, the president of Arms Tech. He's got him like covered in tripwires so Snake can't get close to him or else he'll blow up. This is the
Mhm.
first boss fight, and it's a fairly straightforward one. You basically have to pistol duel Ocelot. He's the opposite of Gray Fox in that Gray Fox you have to fight with melee combat, while with Ocelot you can't get close to him, he'll just run away, so you have to use your guns against him.
Yeah, like, with that revolver too, like, not gonna lie, the engravings.
You'll see why they call me Revolver Ocelot.
It's because of these.
It's a fairly straightforward boss fight. You just gotta keep up with him, shoot him when he's reloading, or if you see an opening in his shots. So, not the most complicated boss fight, but it's a fun one nonetheless. Ocelot is a cool character. He's Liquid's right-hand man and chief torturer. He's the most reserved of the Foxhound members, I feel, but even then he has his moments. He can get a little overzealous in his sadism and torture.
I loved Ocelot personally, just because of his mustache, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, he's Russian, I think, but he's pretty much a Western cowboy character. Like, that's his whole aesthetic.
Who's that Western actor that has like that big burly mustache? I feel like there's a
Burt
lot of
Reynolds?
yeah. I think there's a lot of inspiration from him.
Also, at the end of the game, we never do find out what happened to Ocelot. Wonder where he ran off to.
Hmm.
Tell you what, though, he's gonna be missing his right hand, because Gray Fox chops it right off at the end of the boss fight.
Yeah, it kind of came out of left field.
The next boss fight is your first fight with Vulcan Raven. Like I said, he's a indigenous Native American shaman. Little on the stereotypical side, but it was the 90s. Not that that excuses it, but whatever. He's in a tank.
A tank, you say? That boy is big, largin' and charging.
Like Gray Fox, he looks at Snake as his ultimate challenge. He's like, finally, a worthy opponent. For this first boss fight, you just chuck a bunch of grenades at the tank and blow it up.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Since we're here, let's talk about the second encounter with Vulcan Raven much later in the game. You're in this like freezer area and he has a minigun ripped straight off of a fighter jet. You have to
Yeah.
avoid him because he will just mow you down if you try to engage him in traditional combat. So you have to use either like Nikata missiles to go around the arena and ambush him or set up bombs and claymores to trick him. It's a boss fight that changes up the way you've been going about combat throughout the game.
Yeah, it's definitely not straightforward. It requires a little bit of thinking. If you can think, you got it.
Yeah. After his second boss fight, after you defeat him finally, he gives his monologue to Snake about how they're not so different and all that, and asks
Yeah.
again who Snake is. And then he gets eaten by ravens and there's nothing left of him but his gun.
Yep, kind of way to go out.
Yeah, I mean, it is his philosophy. We return to from whence we came and to nature and all that, but it's I kind of like what they were going for with him being this like mystic shaman type of guy, but other than his like final speech to Snake and everything, he doesn't really go into that.
Mhm.
But then, of course, we have Psycho Mantis.
Now, this boss fight is definitely one that is memorable.
Yeah, it is arguably the most memorable boss fight in the game. His design is he's the
He
skinny,
kind of reminds me of a
scarred.
skinny Bane, like from
Yeah,
Batman.
he's thin, he's ghostly, his face is all scarred up and very unsettling. He wears a gas mask to cover it up and also like keep the thoughts out and everything because he can read people's minds. And he's just floating there. And I just love Psycho Mantis as a villain. Not the most in-depth per se, but he is very unique and memorable. I'm sure all of you listeners out there are well aware by now. Psycho Mantis is the codifier of the fourth wall breaking boss fight.
Yeah, he sort of set the standard for some real fourth wall breaking. So, Psycho Mantis, sort of like after his whole monologue, you're now trying to fight him, but for some reason you can't seem to hit him because Psycho Mantis is reading your input. Every single button you touch, Psycho Mantis will react to it. So the big thing is that while he's listing off all your save files, which by the way
Yeah.
he can access,
Yeah, if you have Konami games on your memory card, he'll reference them. He'll also shake your controller with the rumble feature. He'll say, "Put
Mhm.
your controller down and I'll make it move. Behold my power."
Nice little dual shock. Then, basically, just to like win and kind of take care of Psycho Mantis, you need to unplug the port from the player one port and put it into player two.
The only downside to the Psycho Mantis fight is, for as memorable as it is, once you figure out his gimmick or the strategy to beat him, it's a pretty straightforward fight. You just shoot him a bunch of times. He'll teleport, throw some objects with his telekinesis, but it's a pretty simple fight after that. But there are
Hmm.
a lot of really cool details with the fight. He's mind controlling Meryl in the beginning and forces you to like knock her out, or else he'll make her shoot herself in the head or kill Snake. A really cool detail that actually kind of freaked me out the first time I've played it. If you go into first person during the fight or before when Meryl's being mind controlled, you don't see it from Snake's point of view. You see it from Meryl's point of view through Psycho Mantis's eyes. After you defeat Psycho Mantis, he talks about how, like, going back to what I said about motivation and goals, his whole thing is, I was forced to become this monster because my parents were cruel to me, so I burned down our village because cruelty is the only thing I know. He goes out with, like, hey, you know what? Fuck Liquid, fuck Foxhound, I'm gonna move this bookshelf and show you the secret passageway.
We kind of touched on Sniper Wolf, like
Yeah, while we're here, we
boss
might as well
fight.
talk
Yeah.
about her again. She's the femme fatale, flirtatious
Hmm.
with Snake type of like, oh, I'm gonna kill you, but damn, you're sexy kind of thing. Was born on the battlefield. She was, again, every character offers their perspective of motivation, and hers, like Psycho Mantis, but a little more personal. Hers is one of vengeance. She kills people because she thinks this is the only way that there can be equality in the world, that everyone
Hmm.
dies by her bullet and all that.
Yeah.
And Otacon develops a crush on her, like he gets the hots for Sniper Wolf. Not stalkery, but I don't know. He's like, she's beautiful and a killer. That's hot. And he just like develops romantic feelings towards her, even though he never interacts with her until she's dying.
Yeah,
Well,
which
to be fair, I just remembered, okay, it's not just that she looks good. He did help her take care of the wolves that the terrorists were just gonna kill anyway after they took over Shadow Moses. But yeah, he's like, no, she's a good person deep down. But of course, Snake's like, she's just killing everyone. You know, she shot Meryl, she's trying to kill me. So yeah, Soldier's gonna fight it out. His feelings towards Sniper Wolf are very much one sided. I mean, as the quote goes, do you believe love can bloom on a battlefield?
and that what a statement that is.
I do think she has the saddest death of all the Foxhound characters when after you
Really?
finish her off in the second boss fight. And yeah, I think she's the most sympathetic out of all of them. Or at the very least, she gives the best justification for why she joined up with Liquid and everything, but actions and all that. She was still an antagonist at the end of the day, but I think she's the most sympathetic.
Well, good. I'm glad at least we got something out of a female villain besides
Yeah.
just hot looks and thirst. Let's
Let's
go on to the next one, Mr. Decoy Octopus.
You only meet him once and you don't even realize it's him before he dies.
Pretty much it.
Decoy Octopus, his whole thing is he can disguise himself as anyone. He is the master of disguise. And you don't know
Mhm.
it at the time, but he disguises himself as the DARPA chief who is being held prisoner at the beginning of the game. And Snake talks to him, and this is where Snake finds out. So the whole plan is Liquid and Ocelot mostly, accidentally killed the DARPA chief trying to get the launch codes from him or the password. But then Decoy Octopus is like, I'll disguise myself as the DARPA chief and I'll trick Snake, who we know is infiltrated Shadow Moses, into giving up any useful information. But of course, then it turns out that he was infected with fox dye, so he just dies of a heart attack right then and there.
Yeah, pretty forgettable.
Yeah, you don't even find out it was Decoy Octopus until much later when Liquid mentions it. And that brings us to the head honcho of Foxhound himself, Solid Snake's twin brother slash clone, Liquid Snake.
Liquid!
Oh no, he's hot!
Blonde, dashing,
English?
I dare say.
L'enfant terrible, brother. So, what are your thoughts on this dashing liquid rogue?
To be honest, I can't tell if he's hot or not, but I can tell you this much. He kind of reminded me of, like, when he took his shirt off, kind of remind me of Alucard from the Castlevania animation
Yeah,
on Netflix.
or Sephiroth.
Or Sephiroth. Yeah, that's the big one.
Yeah.
Sephiroth.
I don't know, long-haired English boys. Well, I don't think
All he's
Sephiroth's really
missing was a
English.
long sword.
Well, he's got fists and a giant robot.
That works.
You fight Liquid 4 times throughout the game. First on the Hind D, then again when he's controlling Metal Gear, and then again with fists on top of Metal Gear.
Gear.
And then again when you're escaping from Shadow Moses before the government blows it up and he's in a Jeep just gunning you down. I'm gonna be honest, I thought the 4th time was a little unnecessary. I thought if he had quote unquote died after the fight on top of Metal Gear would have been a more satisfying conclusion to him, but in the end it doesn't really matter. It's still a very cool action sequence at the end as you're racing through the tunnels of Shadow Moses with him in hot pursuit and Snake's on the gunner. It's a really cool climax to the game, but
Liquid is, I want to say, stage by stage, I've been an outcast, therefore I am evil.
well,
Like,
he's the charismatic villainous leader.
yeah.
He and Snake, as he explains, are the true sons of Big Boss, the world's greatest super soldier. Snake is supposed to be Big Boss's perfect clones because he has his dominant genes, while Liquid received the recessive inferior genes. Liquid, I don't think that's how genetics work. Shut up, brother!
Yep, pretty much Mr. Liquid Snake was not really smart in the genetics department.
So his whole plan was take over Shadow Moses, use Metal Gear's nuke capabilities to threaten the White House for the remains of Big Boss, and also $1 billion.
1 billion? Why stop there?
Why settle for $1 billion when you could have $1 million?
Huzzah.
Liquid Snake, I think, is a really great villain, and he serves as the perfect epitome or example of the game's thesis of genes and genetic engineering and motivation, like I've been saying. Liquid's whole philosophy is clear cut, black and white. Genes decide who you are as a person and nothing else. You have to do what your genetic code dictates. What your DNA is decided from the moment you're born, and there's nothing you can do to change that. That's what Liquid is ostensibly arguing against Snake.
You guys ever heard of nature versus nurture?
I think Snake offers the counterpoint, if not verbally, at least from, existence standpoint of you are based on your experiences, your interactions with other humans. Who you are is decided by yourself, not your genes. And I feel like Liquid and Naomi serve as two sides of the same coin on this topic, because Naomi also comes from a similar observation that genes decide who you are from the moment you're born. And while she's not as strict or rigid in her ways on this as Liquid is, it is interesting that the two offer two similar arguments in regards to nature versus nurture, as you said. I remember seeing a post a while back how each Metal Gear villain throughout the series represents a different political system taken to its extreme. And for Liquid, they had him represent fascism. I kind of get where they're coming from. I mean, fascism, as it's commonly known, is Nazi Germany, and eugenics was a
Mhm.
main component of that philosophy that people are inherently superior to others. Obviously, that is not true, which I think we all need a reminder of is something that we have to be very keen of not allowing to come back into popularity. We need to keep in mind that we can't let this become a widely spread belief because we all know what happens when that does.
Sound like you're getting kinda angry and teaching the people.
Eugenics is a very twisted and depraved philosophy,
It's
and
definitely a touchy subject in terms of, like, not a good subject to talk about.
point is, though, Liquid as a representative of fascism is a little, I don't know, not exactly the most elaborate outlook, but I can see where the OP of the post came from. Liquid is not authoritarian in the traditional sense, but yeah, Liquid is not a good person. He's charismatic, as all great villains are. In the end, his point is not a very accurate or really sympathetic one. And
Yeah.
then ultimately, Liquid dies from Fox Die, his own DNA working against him in the end. So, how
And also
poetic.
yep, he just kinda dies kinda like Octopus.
I do think he is a really great villain. Like I said, he serves as the antithesis or the prime example of the game's theme of genetic coding and nature versus nurture.
In which, if you kinda look at all the other points that the other members of Foxhound were making, you could say is sort of the original idea, I guess,
Yeah.
in that aspect. Great villains represent the ideas of the grand people that they're leading.
I think Liquid also serves as an example of the game's secondary message, which is on war and the military industrial complex. The reason he wants to survive and achieve Big Boss's dream is because he thinks that people like him in Solid Snake, soldiers who are born and die by the battlefield, their only sense of life is in conflict and war. And he
Mhm.
believes that the world has grown too soft. And he wants to ensure that there will always be a place for people like him and Snake. There will always be a place for warriors and soldiers. And he's going about it in the most, he is just going to kill a bunch of people and ensure that there is always conflict in the world.
Mhm.
They are brothers and mirror images of each other, not just in terms of, genetics, blood, and all that, but just philosophy, worldview, and personal experiences and outlook on life.
In a way, it proved the nurture side of it because they were both from the same person, Big Boss, and they both grew up in different environments to later become different people.
There are a couple more characters I do want to talk about that we kind of skimmed over, but let's talk
Mhm.
about Otacon, Mr. Hal
Yeah!
Emmerich. Oh man,
Our
everyone's
boy,
favorite
the
otaku
otaku,
weeb.
just like my Japanese anime girls.
Yeah. Ah, man. Given his affinity for anime and Sniper Wolf being his kind of woman, I think there's a few anime out there that Otacon would love these days.
Not gonna lie, Otacon felt like, at first, a personal attack until I realized how much of a chat he is.
I mean, his first scene is him pissing himself in fear of Gray Fox, which, I mean, to be fair, he was about to kill him, but yeah, Otacon, Hal Emmerich. As he explains, the name Otacon is a combination of otaku and convention. It's Otaku Con. I just like that, yeah, this was the 90s. Anime and stuff wasn't really widely known in the West, so he has to, like, he just explains what anime is to Snake. Also, Meryl refers to him as Otakon later in the game, and I'm not sure if that was just, the voice actress mispronouncing the line, but it does make sense after I thought about it because even though everyone else calls him Otakon, if it is a combination of otaku, it would be Otakon. Yeah, he's a fun character. He's a scrawny little nerd who likes his robots and anime and all that. But he is a reliable, good friend to Snake. He helps him out. He unlocks doors, hacks into computers and everything. Again, another 90s ism, but Snake's like, "Are you a hacker?" Like, it's like, yeah, he's an engineer, secret weapons developer nerd. Of course he's a hacker, Snake. Why do you think that's surprising? But I
He
don't know.
used to work in IT.
Yeah, I guess you could call him the comic relief of the game since he's cowardly and all that and very much not a fighter. He's
Mhm.
goofy, but I wouldn't say he's, like you said, he's not really a punching bag. In the end, he does come through and he does help Snake out in a lot of really important moments. Like, he's the reason Snake is able to break out of the holding cell later in the game. The alternate ending where Meryl dies and Otacon is the one that joins Snake in the end is also really heartfelt. You really do get why Snake would be friends with Otacon. Like, he does consider Otacon an important ally by the end of it all. It's not really romantic, although I'm sure there's plenty of shippers out there that would put Otacon and Snake together. I mean, they would make a cute couple, let's be real.
That's what we're talking about, baby. That's what we're looking for.
A few things to wrap up before we head out. Metal Gear Solid did receive a remake in 2004 on the Nintendo GameCube of all consoles, the Twin Snakes remake. It was given updated graphics, updated gameplay to be more in line with Metal Gear Solid 2, which was a recent release at the time. And I know that the Twin Snakes remake is a little controversial among fans because the cutscenes are a little different. The cutscenes were directed by a Japanese movie director, Ryuhei Kitamura, probably mispronounced that, apologies, but yeah, he was a well-known Japanese movie director, and they got him to do the cutscenes, and even by Metal Gear Kojima standards, the Twin Snakes is a very over-the-top, very exaggerated game. I'm not super against the Twin Snakes like I know other fans of the series are. I think it's a fine remake and all, but I'll always prefer the original take on things. It being on the Nintendo GameCube meant that there were also a lot of Nintendo references. Like, I'm pretty sure Psycho Mantis, when he reads his memory card and you have Nintendo games on it, he'll reference them instead of Konami. Like, so you like Mario Sunshine, don't you?
Yeah, that sound kind of funny coming from him. Play Mario Kart with Psycho Mantis. He know my every move.
There's also the VR training, which is like the game's main tutorial. It's like an optional side thing you can get from the main menu before you start the game. You just go through a series of quick little missions that teach you about movement, stealth, combat, and all that. I do like the little completion you get where it plays the theme, da 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 da. And then you hear Naomi like, impressive, Snake. I don't know. It just feels very rewarding for such a simple task.
Yeah,
Well, you want to talk about Shadow Moses as a location? Because I think Shadow Moses base is really cool for a video game setting.
I like it that one, it feels like a military base because it was based upon it as well as had
Yeah,
inspirations from it. I enjoyed the layout. I
yeah.
can't say I deny its platform. Okay, there's one part I actually didn't care about the caves.
Where the wolves are, yeah, that part was really weird. I think if you like disguise, if you hide in a box, the wolves will pee on it. Yeah, Shadow Moses, I really like the color palette that Konami developers were going for. Everything is very dark, and they use light as a way to indicate to the player where they're supposed to go. It's a nice little subtle, not so subtle way of level design. Go where the light is. If you see color, that's where something important is. Lots of blacks, greens, and grays. Very industrial, very synthetic, like I said earlier. So every time you see a splash of color, it's there to indicate, okay, something useful, like a ration or a new weapon or something. This game looked very unique for the time. Like, this was a time when colorful games were really common. So having a
Mhm.
game with darker lighting, darker, more natural tones was much more rare. And I know for the PS3 360 era, we kind of went a little too far in that artistic visual direction where everything was brown and gray, but
Mm,
Metal Gear, I think, did it pretty right. I think it fit with the vibe and atmosphere of the game pretty well.
I agree with that point.
I
Yeah,
think that's just gonna about wrap up Metal Gear Solid.
quite a game of military action to stealth gameplay to really interesting connections between characters to convoluted plot points. It's
Yeah.
amazing in every single aspect, and of course, it has its hiccups, but what game doesn't?
So, yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this episode, everybody. Thank you again for listening to Backwards Compatible. I've been your host, Chase.
And I've been Garrett. Bye bye. Colonel, I'm trying to sneak past the guards. I'm so dummy thick. But the clap of my ass cheeks is learning